The family and the police urge anyone who has reliable information regarding the murders, no matter how small or unimportant that information may seem, to please contact the police.
After 2 years, hundreds of witnesses, and even more tips from the public, police still have no answers, urging people to come forward to help solve the murders of Barry and Honey Sherman. It's been 2 years since the Shermans were found dead in their home. Investigators are now urging the public to come forward with information, including people who have already submitted tips to private investigators. John Lancaster explains.
It's been 2 years since Honey and Barry Sherman were found strangled inside their North Toronto mansion. Their home has since been demolished. But what's been rebuilt, it seems, is the once strained relationship between the couple's family and Toronto police. The head of the homicide squad read out this statement today on the family's behalf.
The Sherman family appreciates the hard work and dedication of the police officers working on this case. They are committed to working with us and have full confidence that the Toronto Police Service will solve this crime.
It wasn't always that way. In the early days after the murders, the Sherman family hired Toronto lawyer Brian Greenspan and a team of private investigators to run their own parallel investigation. The family complained police were mishandling the case. The Shermans team set up its own tip line, which sifted through about 300 tips, about 100 more than police took in. No more, say police.
The work of the private investigative team hired by the family at the outset has been completed. And all we're doing now is moving the responsibility for collecting the information back to the police service where it should belong.
To boost the investigation, a new appeal for information and a new email tip line. Still, some are worried about why the case hasn't been solved yet.
We're perplexed as neighbors and as friends and as people who knew them. We're perplexed as to why this hasn't been coming to a resolution and why we don't have any answers yet. I mean, it's saddening.
Family friend Paul Godfrey says it's good news police continue to keep the case active, even if the private investigation appears over.
As more time goes by, everyone begins to think, well, maybe they'll never catch them. But we have seen, as I said, in recent times, crimes being solved over a longer period of time. That doesn't give a lot of comfort to the family, but at least they know that the police have not closed the file, the police have not given up.
Police say they've already obtained 38 court orders to search properties and seize information, as well as interviewing more than 240 witnesses, all in this ongoing effort to find out who killed the billionaire philanthropists. John Lancaster, CBC News, Toronto.
It's been a car building hub for a century, but now General Motors will close its production plants in Oshawa at the end of this week. Thousands of people will lose their jobs just before the holidays. Greg Ross was in Oshawa today to speak with employees, many of whom are still contemplating their futures.
Living the nightmare now.
Is that what it feels like?
That's exactly it.
Susan Crocky is one of the thousands of GM employees who are about to be out of work when the company closes its assembly plant in Oshawa later this week. At 57 years old, Crocky says she has serious concerns about her future.
At my age, in order for me to start somewhere else, no one's really going to want to hire me.
Today, Jerry Dias, the president of the union that represents GM workers, was in Oshawa. He chastised the company for allowing something like this to happen so close to the holidays.
I mean, I can't understand how this decision could be made at this time of the year, but it really has to do about the callousness.
But he says his main reason for being there was to help oversee the transition into a parts plant, a move that will save a few hundred jobs in Oshawa.
I'm going to be going into the plant to make sure that the commitment of maintaining the integrity as we switch to a plant that is building parts. I'm here today to make sure that that commitment is being fulfilled.
Rob Osborne was offered one of those jobs, but after 39 years with the company, he took a buyout instead to allow a younger employee to keep their job.
It's a shame. It's a shame that after 100 years of building products here.
Osborne says it was a tough decision. The company has been a part of his life since the day he was born.
My dad started in 1950, And back then, it was in the old North plant, and it was called Material.
He says he's had uncles and cousins who have worked there as well, and he's made some good friends.
What's it going to be like for you walking out of these doors on Friday?
I'm probably going to have tears. And everybody will be hugging each other. And so, again, I think the realization will be on Monday, when I don't have to get up to come to work. And I say, oh my goodness, what am I going to do with myself?
The union says even after Friday, it will continue to fight to bring jobs back.
It's not too late. As long as you've got bricks and mortars across the street, and like I said, we bargained to maintain the integrity of the plant, the ability to build future vehicles. As long as that ability is there and it's going to stay there, then we're not going to give up.
Greg Ross, CBC News, Oshawa.
The province is cancelling plans for a new light rail line in Hamilton. The transportation minister says it's because the true cost of the project has ballooned. They're trying to blame the previous Liberal government, but the PCs were the ones that came under fire today. Mike Wise is following this for us tonight. And Mike, Caroline Mulroney got a police escort in Hamilton tonight?
That's right, Dwight. The transportation minister never did get the chance to talk to reporters in Hamilton about cancelling this project. Now, the 17-stop LRT would have run through downtown Hamilton from Eastgate Mall to McMaster University, connecting to the GO train station. It's been the source of much debate by Hamilton Council over the years, initially pegged at a cost of around $1 billion. But I want to show you the scene in Hamilton this afternoon. After word got out and a crowd of upset supporters learned of the cancellation, the minister's staff canceled the press conference. You see that right there, removing the podium in front of reporters. There's supposed to be a technical briefing, but many upset city councillors wanted to attend that as well. That briefing never happened. Now the transportation minister is en route to Queen's Park, where she's expected to speak with reporters tonight. That's her leaving the building and with the police escort there. It was left to Hamilton's mayor, Fred Eisenberger, to provide the details, saying the project was about to go to tender.
That's a betrayal of the city of Hamilton. That is not working in good faith with a partner. In my mind, it says that the province isn't open for business. They're looking to close down businesses across the province. We have three bidders that are procuring this, international bidders, respected international bidders that are now told to park their pens and go home.
Now, he's also concerned about the 40 staffers who were working on the project who are now laid off just before Christmas. Now, for her part, the transportation minister put out a statement saying her government canceled the LRT line after learning it was no longer a $1 billion project, but a $5.5 billion project. She says, when our government assumed office, we learned the previous government was privately expecting the total cost of the project to exceed $3 billion. The news itself was sobering, but when I assumed the role of Minister of Transportation earlier this year, I learned the cost projections for the LRT project were even higher. Now, she says the government promised Hamilton $1 billion for transit, and that money is still available. Now, the opposition leader, Andrea Horvath, herself a local Hamilton MPP, wasted no time calling out the government's assumptions about this project.
This is another callous cut by the Ford government. They've made up numbers again to try to justify this cut, but it is an absolute betrayal of the people of Hamilton.
I checked in with some of the other LRT projects in the GTA. The city of Mississauga expects its LRT to continue moving forward. It's announced contractors for that $1.6 billion line in October. We are continuing to follow this, and we'll hear from the transportation minister tonight. We'll have that for you at 11. Dwight?
We will see you then. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
The TTC board wants to hike most transit fares by 10 cents next year, but the proposed bump sparked a heated exchange at the board's meeting this morning.
I am very measured. This is outrageous. There was no consultation whatsoever for members of our community to be part of this process.
You've made the.
And what I've made.
You've made the
point, and that is let us stop with the charade. Let's stop with the bullshit. Let's stop with this.
Again, a very pejorative statement.
It's not criticism.
No, it is a criticism of Councillor Callerell.
I questioned the process, and I questioned how this committee continues to support the process.
You're not.
It does not actually meet the needs of our
I'm going to ask someone to remove the deputant. Yeah, call security, please.
The fare increase was announced Friday, leaving little time for the public to hear about the hike and voice their concerns. In the meantime, Mayor John Tory is standing by the TTC.
I support it simply because we are significantly increasing the support for the TTC from city taxpayers as a whole. You'll see that in the budget in January. There's a whole host of things we're doing, including hiring 50 more people, and I'm sorry we have to do it, but we're hiring 50 more people to help ensure that people are paying their fares.
The TTC says the increase will come into effect on March 1st and will create an additional $31.4 million in revenue. A young girl is at Sick Kids with serious injuries after she was hit by a fire truck this afternoon. It happened at Oakwood and Rosemount, that's just south of St. Clair West. The pumper truck was responding to a fire when the girl was hit. Police say its siren and lights were on. Toronto's fire chief says the girl is now in stable condition and that there will be a full investigation into what happened. It's a busy road that many people cross every day, and typically Queen's Park Crescent is tough to get through in certain spots with no crosswalks or lights in those locations. City Council may change that, making it safer now for pedestrians. Lisa Shing explains.
The provincial legislature and the University of Toronto are separated by this road, Queen's Park Crescent, 4 lanes across and always busy with vehicle and pedestrian traffic. There's a path that leads to the road, but crossing can be precarious.
You don't have a clear line of sight to see cars far down.
I've observed cars jumping the curb. I have called the City of Toronto a number of times, expressing my concern for pedestrians.
There's campers here, and if there's traffic lights, it will be much more convenient.
They may just be in luck. There are currently 6 crossings on the 1.4-kilometer road. The city is proposing 3 more traffic lights at these locations. One of the reasons the city is considering putting in traffic lights right here is because cars are driving quickly along the stretch. So we're going to see if that's the case for ourselves. Using a speed gun, most cars we clocked in a half-hour period went faster than the speed limit. Some were driving close to 70 kilometers an hour. The highest number we've clocked so far is 76 kilometers per hour in a 50 zone. 40 kilometers per hour is the speed limit for going around the bend. Most pedestrians welcome the traffic lights.
I think it would be much better and more convenience.
People can cross elsewhere, but it causes some inconvenience, but it will cause the traffic to be worse as well.
So far this year, more than 30 pedestrians have been killed on Toronto's roads. City officials say the new crossings will prevent more deaths.
We've seen this year and over the last couple of years a rising number of killed and seriously injured people.
The lights could go up by the end of next year. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
Some breaking news for you now. It looks like high school and teachers will go ahead with a one-day strike on Wednesday. CBC Toronto has learned negotiations between the province and the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation broke off today on just the first of 2 scheduled days of talks. Now, the sides were supposed to sit down again tomorrow, but their mediator says they are too far apart to even bother. High schools in 10 boards, including York, Halton, and the Kawarthas, will be affected by Wednesday's one-day strike. The city unveiled its first speed enforcement sign this morning. Mayor John Tory says he hopes the radar cameras will urge drivers to slow down, especially near schools.
When we had a test camera right here during the test period, the majority of drivers going by here on Renforth Road were speeding, and one person, believe it or not, and it was recorded electronically, was going 202 kilometers in a 40 kilometer per hour posted zone.
The city is installing 50 automated cameras, 2 in each ward. They are going into community safety zones as part of its Vision Zero plan to try and help reduce pedestrian deaths. Now, provincial regulations require that warning signs must be put up 90 days before fines come into effect. So today, the city did just that. And starting this week, it will be issuing letters warning speeders to slow down. Actual tickets will be given out in the spring of next year. For more information on where the radar cameras will be, head to our website. That's at cbc.ca/Toronto.
In the midst of the ever-changing movie industry, Canada's largest movie chain has agreed to a takeover deal with a company from the UK. I'm Talia Ricci, and coming up, we speak with a cinema professor and an Oscar-winning producer about how Cineplex has adapted over the years and what's next for the industry.
So, Colin, I went to see Come From Away with my mom and my sister yesterday. We were in the audience, but I understand you're on a stage and we may have something later in the show about that, Colin?
Well, first of all, Come From Away is awesome, so I'm so
glad. It was an incredible show, loved it, but I heard you put on a good performance. We won't get into it now.
You heard, but
there may be
you
some
don't
pics
know.
later.
Yes,
Costumes.
yes, the Nutcracker.
Wow.
It's got to be a cannon doll.
Wow.
There may be some images
Just get
later.
to the forecast and stop showing off.
Okay, let me do that. You know, we talk so often about seasonal, but usually we're saying, it's above seasonal, it's below. This is kind of what seasonal is in terms of how it feels with our temperatures. So for this time of year, we should be just around 0, just above, kind of between freezing and 1 for an afternoon or a daytime high. So our current temperatures, not too bad. We're at 0 in Toronto. We were at 1 earlier. Mississauga 0, -1 for Markham. You've dipped below. A little cooler there into Oshawa. What's also sort of interesting and kind of nice is that if I factor the winds in, we don't see a huge change in terms of how it feels. So the wind chill not that significant at the moment anyway. Things are going to change as we get especially into the middle of this week as some much colder air will be moving in, but not a lot of active weather to be worried about. Where there is active weather is just to the south of us and a pretty potent storm system pushing in, moving towards the northeastern U.S. As it moves through, though, it looks like we are just going to miss it. Not even really a glancing blow other than around the Niagara Peninsula. So here, for our viewers watching from there, you may pick up a few centimeters, possibly even over towards Hamilton. Likely elsewhere, it would just be a little bit of flurry activity. And then with some winds behind that as we get into Wednesday, we may see some flurries back into the GTA as well. Tonight, though, -7, also seasonal, by the way. And there we go, tomorrow afternoon, hoping to get us up to 1 degree again. Dwight.
Looking good. Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
Canada's largest movie theater chain is being snatched up by a UK company for $2.8 billion. It is the latest takeover in the ever-changing movie industry where streaming films are becoming more and more popular. Talia Ritchie joins us live now from Scotiabank Theatre. And Talia, what do people working in the Canadian film industry think about this?
Well, Dwight, the people I spoke with today remain optimistic. They say it's the nature of what's happening in the movie biz. If you walk into a theater like this one behind me, it's no longer just about movies. There's games and events and even the excuse to take out your cell phone and participate in things before the movie starts. So as these theaters navigate these changes, the experts we spoke with today said Cineplex actually did a pretty good job keeping up with the times.
The 18 theaters on 2 floors are color-coded and numbered for easy identification.
Theater 5.
From pioneering the multiplex theater.
Up until that point, many theaters were single venues, and Cineplex was one of the first to introduce a large number of smaller theaters all in one place.
To one-upping the movie experience in every way possible.
Comfortable seating, differences in food options, for example, but also entertainment in the lobby areas.
This professor of cinema studies says Cineplex has done its fair share to adapt to ever-changing movie-watching habits.
So they've always been sort of in the vanguard of reinventing themselves to entice patrons, which is the main thing that theater operators have to worry about.
While trying to keep the theater experience bigger, better, and louder than what any home movie experience could match, over the years, Cineplex has also expanded by building up the Rec Room, Palladium, and Topgolf Canada locations.
We're in the middle of a fairly major paradigm shift all the way across because, the streamers are kind of driving the boat now.
That's a change Jay Miles Dale has had to navigate as a producer. He doesn't think this deal will have a negative impact on Canadian filmmakers. In the announcement, Cineplex did say support for Canadian festivals and programs will continue.
Well, I wouldn't say I was surprised because there's been a high degree of consolidation in our business. I don't know that it's really a loss because I think if you look at Cineplex, I mean, most of their revenues were derived from American films and foreign films. It's not particularly, it's a Canadian business success story, but it's not really a cultural success story.
And even though fewer people have been going to the theater in recent years, Dale hopes he'll still get to show his films on the big screen, no matter who owns them.
What would I say? The shared experience is really an important thing that you can't really replicate at home. So I'd like to think that people will continue to enjoy that, but it's hard to say. I think that the exhibitors are going to have to fight to keep, cinemas relevant.
Now, today's announcement won't affect operations. All 165 theaters across Canada will remain open, and you can still use your scene card. In a statement, the Academy of Canadian Cinema and Television said that Cineworld is lucky to be acquiring Cineplex, and they're excited to see what Cineworld has planned to help Canadian filmmakers compete for more screen time. This deal is expected to close in 2020. Dwight?
Thank you, Talia. Cannabis edibles, extracts, and topicals will be legal across Canada tomorrow, but they won't be on any shelves in Ontario until the new year. Despite the long-awaited expansion, cannabis-infused foods, vapes, and other pot products haven't passed all regulatory checkpoints in this province, so the holdup means retailers won't be getting their first shipment until early January. But Ontario won't be waiting alone. Quebec and Alberta are also facing the same delay. Emissions are going down in the GTA, but a new report says the progress isn't nearly enough. The numbers released today give the most comprehensive look at local emissions in years. Nick Boisvert has more on the findings and how the decline of electric vehicles is making things worse.
After crunching 2 years of data, Brian Purcell says it boils down to this.
We are making some progress on reducing emissions across the Greater Toronto-Hamilton area. We're not making progress nearly fast enough.
In a landmark report, his climate group broke down emissions from 2015 to 2017. And while they are declining, they'll have to do so about 4 times faster to meet 2030 reduction targets. Here's the latest breakdown. Buildings account for about 43% of pollution in the GTHA, while transportation made up 34% and industry about 19%. But of those three, only one is actually getting worse.
The biggest concern right now is transportation emissions. That's the one major source that's trending upward as opposed to downward.
The Atmospheric Fund has identified electric vehicles, or the lack of them, as a big part of that problem. Since the Ford government canceled rebates on EVs last year, sales have plummeted 55%. That puts Ontario well behind the leading provinces, where rebates and incentives live on.
Well, the incentives have been very, very useful to achieve these sales in other jurisdictions, and I think Ontario should have another serious look at it.
It's really difficult, even if you are committed to choosing electric, it's difficult to find one.
Kara Clareman runs a nonprofit that promotes electric vehicles. She says the vanished rebates have made it hard to even find EVs in Ontario, a vicious cycle of declining supply and demand.
When those rebates were canceled, many of the automakers sent their vehicle supply to Quebec, where there are more progressive policies and incentives in place.
The Ford government says it canceled the rebates because they were unfair to northern and rural communities. Still, the province is counting on a major uptake as part of its climate plan. It wants EV sales to go up 3,000% by 2030. Nick Boisvert, CBC News, Toronto.
I hear a lot of people preaching about being green, but to actually live it is a little different story.
Taking a stand on climate change by not touring. After the break, more on the growing list of acts who are putting their performances on pause. Stay with us.
The weather update is brought to you by Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train.
When Shawn Mendes hit the road for his 2019 World Tour, he decided to go green. He partnered with a nonprofit to reduce his environmental footprint, doing things like cutting down on single-use plastic water bottles, bringing in local food for crew members, and using green cleaning products. And Mendes isn't the only one. As Tashana Reed explains, many musicians are realizing that in order to reduce their impact, they are going to have to make some serious changes.
This is what going on tour usually looks like for Coldplay. Their last one took them to 122 cities, performing in front of more than 5.5 million fans. This time around, there's no world tour, just the band, a rooftop in Jordan, and a free performance live streamed on YouTube.
Thank you if you're watching, anywhere you're watching.
Coldplay says it's pressing pause on touring because of how it contributes to carbon emissions. Concert goers in Toronto support the idea.
You hear a lot of people preaching about being green, but to actually live it is a little different story.
That's a little heartbreaking. I love Coldplay, so I would love to see them live. But no, I do think that's a nice thing.
The band joins a growing number of global musicians taking stock of touring's environmental impact.
Basically, we're trying to be as green as possible on the entire tour.
Teen chart topper Billie Eilish announced an eco-friendly world tour with no single-use plastics. While British music duo Massive Attack commissioned its own study to look at their carbon footprint while touring. The musicians collected data during 2 tours and handed it over to researchers at the Tyndall Centre for Climate Research.
The big things that we're looking at are banned travel and how they get from place to place and the ordering of those places.
Researchers will map the carbon footprint of a music tour, but it's not just about how the band travels. How the audience gets to shows and the energy consumption at venues is a big piece of the carbon emissions puzzle.
Since announcing the work, loads of people across the sector have got in touch with us to say that they want to be part of it and talk to us and share data.
Musician Faye Milton is the co-founder of Music Declares Emergency, a group of hundreds of musicians that demand governments and the music industry do their part to get emissions to net zero.
It's going to affect different artists in different ways, and if lots and lots of artists stop touring for a while we find greener solutions, maybe that's what needs to happen.
And while it could translate to less tours, some artists say it's a price they're willing to pay. Tashana Reid, CBC News, Toronto.
A lot of pressure, it's a bit daunting, but I think we're all just really excited to get in there and get started.
It's first day at big school, isn't it? And here we go.
After a historic election, it's time to get down to work in Britain, and they have a big task ahead. Get the country out of the European Union in just over a month's time. More on that coming up after the break. In the fiscal update released today, the federal government describes the Canadian economy as strong and growing, but Conservatives see doom on the horizon, forecasting what they call a made-in-Canada recession ahead. Liberals say more than a dozen expert analysts disagree.
There are 14 private sector economists, including economists from all of the 6 banks, from Desjardins, from the Caisse de Dépôt, from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. All 14 of them are projecting growth. Not one of them is projecting a recession.
Morneau acknowledges that maintaining growth, even at low levels, will not be without challenges. He cites global uncertainty in trade and in the natural resource sector. But Liberals hope to maintain economic confidence by continued investment in Canadians through tax cuts and other measures. The plan could see the deficit rising to $26.6 billion in the current year. Morneau says it will fall to under $12 billion over the next 5 years, while the size of debt relative to the economy remains flat. Julie Van Dusen is in our parliamentary bureau in Ottawa watching all of this. So, Julie, what exactly are the Conservatives saying about the economic statement? What's the doom and gloom here?
So, Dwight, they're saying that the Liberals are reckless for racking up big deficits when they promised the opposite. If you recall, in 2015, when they were first elected, they said they would run modest deficits of $10 billion and that now, in 2019, the books would be balanced. Well, 2019 is here and it's just about gone. And as you mentioned, the deficit is $26.6 billion with no end in sight. In fact, in 4 years, it'll still be at more than 11. And yes, private sector economists are saying there is no recession in sight, but the Conservatives are saying that the government, with some of its measures, could push Canada into a made-in-Canada recession. They talk about recent indicators, unemployment, for example, latest stats from Statistics Canada, 71,000 jobs lost in November. They say bankruptcies are up, the cost of living is up. And they're saying, look, the Liberals just got elected. They haven't even had a chance to do all that big spending they promised in the campaign. So where's it all going? Take a listen.
First of all, they claimed that they would only reduce and not increase the debt to GDP ratio. This year, the debt to GDP ratio is going up. And next year, it's on the verge of going up before they implement the vast majority of their massively expensive election promises.
All right, and what are the other opposition parties saying then?
Well, you can see in this minority parliament the problem the Liberals will face. On one hand, the Conservatives are saying put the brakes on spending. On the other hand, you get parties like the NDP that are saying you're not spending enough on the right places. So take a listen to the NDP and what they had been looking for in the statement.
A real push to put in place universal single-payer pharmacare. It should have included support so that Indigenous communities are no longer having to boil their water in order to have safe drinking water in their communities. It should have included a real urgent move to deal with the housing affordability crisis.
And Dwight, the government will be facing even more demands to spend more when Finance Minister Bill Morneau meets with provincial counterparts tonight and tomorrow in Ottawa. You can be sure there will be demands to spend more, especially from provinces like Alberta and Saskatchewan, who are looking for help to deal with the downturn in the energy sector.
Yeah, got that one right. Senior reporter in our parliamentary bureau in Ottawa, Julie Van Duzen. Thank you, Julie.
You're welcome, Dwight.
In Britain, there's not much rest for the newly elected MPs. Boris Johnson's Conservatives won a resounding majority last week. Parliament resumes this week, and Johnson will be pushing to fulfill his promise to get Brexit done. Renee Filipponi has the latest from London.
Traveling from England's north and headed to day one on the job. These new MPs are a big factor in the decisive Tory victory.
It's a bit surreal. It's like it's actually happening, and here we are, and we can get these things done.
It's a lot of pressure. It's a bit daunting, but I think we're all just really excited to get in there and get started.
More than 100 new Conservative members. Many turned long-held Labour seats blue on election night.
The Labour vote in working-class, post-industrial areas has collapsed.
It's exactly those blue-collared areas the Tories targeted so aggressively. The North, the Midlands, and Wales, where voters felt they weren't being heard.
The signs there that they might change their allegiance, and on election night they did, and it became clear there was a pretty profound realignment going on in British politics.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
At Westminster this evening, a warm welcome from the Prime Minister for the rookie roster.
We must repay the trust of the electorate. That's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to do.
Now it's time for Johnson to deliver on the promises these candidates made during the campaign. For the second time in just over 2 months, the Queen will lay out the government's agenda on Thursday. And it will likely include money for the things that matter to new Tory voters, like healthcare, says this conservative-leaning researcher.
They're planning to put the increases in NHS funding into law. They're planning to take serious action on serious and repeat criminals. They're planning to make sure that Brexit gets delivered.
To make it happen, the Brexit withdrawal bill will be back before Parliament as early as Friday. This time, it's expected to pass.
As for the Labour Party, infighting continues over who and what's to blame for its disastrous result. Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn is on his way out, and the party will finalize details to replace him in the new year. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, London.
Getting back to some more seasonal temps as we head into the official start of winter, Colette.
Yeah, we're getting there, right? And yeah, we've been experiencing these temperatures that are just where they ought to be for this time of year. You need to enjoy it because it's a short-term thing. We have some much colder air that's going to be pushing in midweek. A risk of flurries in the meantime because we're going to see a system just skirt to the south of us, and then with some of that colder air in place, and especially midweek with one windy day in there, there'll be some pretty nasty wind chills to contend with. Not at the moment, though. This is time to really enjoy the present. 0 degrees right now in Toronto, -2 in Hamilton and St. Catharines at -1. A little cooler there in Peterborough at -3. But when I factor the winds in, they're not very strong. And because of that, didn't even change for you there into Peterborough. We may lose a degree or two in a few other spots because of the winds, but not too bad yet anyway. We're not seeing the active weather at this point in our skies, but let me broaden the perspective to show you the storm system, pretty potent one here, moving through the U.S. towards the eastern seaboard. As this continues to carry on through the overnight hours, what happens here is a little bit of light mixed precipitation or flurry activity for southwestern Ontario, A little bit of wet flurry activity here over towards the Niagara Peninsula, and towards tomorrow morning we may get just a glancing blow of what should mostly just be some flurries, some scattered flurries. Could we get a bit of a dusting if it moves just a bit further north? Yes. I would expect that we're going to see a couple of centimeters there around the Niagara Peninsula, 1 to 2. Hamilton, you may even pick up a bit of a dusting there too. Then we get into some breaks into the afternoon. We'll actually see a mix of sun and cloud, and by Wednesday we're going to see the winds setting up with that colder Arctic air pushing in. That's when we get into some squall activity. So with tomorrow's system just glancing us, that's why you see these lesser amounts. If I roll this though towards Wednesday, then we get up to the northwest of the GTA and we see much more significant amounts of snowfall because of the snow squall activity. Tonight your lows -5 to -8. Tomorrow, hoping we get to just above the freezing mark. I say hope, it'll be close there, but there's that cold air. Wednesday night into Thursday, especially Thursday morning, then, Dwight, will be one of the coldest times we'll experience this week.
Yeah, looking chilly. Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
Mass protests in India today. Tens of thousands take to the streets demanding the government scrap a new citizenship law. Why they say it defies India's secular identity. Coming up after the break.
This is the national.
India's Prime Minister is appealing for calm in the face of growing protests. Across the country, tens of thousands of people are demanding the government scrap a new citizenship law. It grants rights to some non-Muslims who have entered the country illegally, but not to those who are Muslim. Punya has more now from New Delhi.
A call to action by students in Delhi is now a nationwide movement. Protests are taking place in at least 15 Indian universities. Students are skipping exams, braving tear gas and water cannons, demanding the government roll back a controversial new citizenship law. It allows non-Muslims who entered India illegally from 3 Muslim-majority countries, Bangladesh, Pakistan and Afghanistan, to become citizens. Protesters say the law is anti-Muslim and is part of the right-wing Hindu-majority government's attempt to marginalize Muslims.
All the people of India protesting against the Citizenship Amendment Bill and NRC, and right now IT Madras condemns police violence against the students.
We are protesting against the bill which the government has passed, which is discriminatory for one particular community. It's against the Muslims, it's against the ethos of India, it's against the secular ideas of India.
I just want to make it clear, nobody is scared. No, like people in Hong Kong are protesting, Chile are protesting, and they are not scared. We are not scared too.
Protests are also taking place in India's border regions, but there people are against the law because they fear it will lead to mass migration. Prime Minister Narendra Modi says the law is necessary and rejects charges of bias. He says it will give refuge to minority communities who face persecution. The government also maintains the bill doesn't target Muslims who already live in India. Punya, CBC News, New Delhi.
We were happy family and we miss them so bad. Life is so empty without them.
Putting a face to the real-life consequences of drunk driving. Coming up next, we speak to the families of victims of impaired driving and why you'll be seeing their loved ones on TTC buses this holiday season. If you pass by a TTC bus over the next few weeks, you'll see portraits of men and women posted on the back of the vehicles. They are images of people killed by impaired drivers. It's a project by Mothers Against Drunk Driving to remind us to always drive sober, but especially during the holiday season. Kelda Ewan caught up with some families whose lives are forever changed because of impaired driving.
Daughters, sons, sisters, brothers, 10 in total, each one killed by an impaired driver, each one now memorialized on the back of a TTC bus.
It's bittersweet. I mean, there's so many of these posters.
Brian Wijeratna's father, Neil, and sister, Alicia, were killed in 2012. They were on their way back from Florida, driving northbound on the 427 when they were struck by an impaired driver going the wrong way. Both died at the scene. Brian's mother, Antoinette, was badly injured. She still remembers waking up to the horrific news.
My world is collapsed, my world shattered.
The pain, they say, doesn't go away.
We were a happy family, and we miss them so bad. Life is so empty without them.
Over the past 10 years, more than 1,700 people have been killed and over 25,000 others injured in collisions involving drunk drivers. As of the end of November, there have been 41 deaths involving alcohol or drugs on OPP-patrolled roads. In 2018, 56 people were killed. The OPP is warning drivers they have more powers now under impaired driving laws introduced last year. For instance, officers can now demand a breathalyzer test from anyone, even if you're not suspected of impaired driving.
The man that killed Michael, he refused the breathalyzer.
Marc Boutilier's son, Michael, was only 24 when he was killed by an impaired driver in 2015.
I miss his hugs. He had the world's best hugs. Yeah. Every day still, I think about him. I love him. I miss him.
She and others also worry about cannabis.
The younger generations don't take it as seriously in terms of its impairment as alcohol, but they really should.
The initiative is part of MAD's Project Red Ribbon campaign, which runs until January 2nd.
I don't want any mother to go through these things, any wife to go through these things. So I feel like I'm helping someone.
Kelda Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
Anytime you get to make a difference in someone's life, you want to try and do it, or you want to try and help out.
After the break, we head to Sick Kids for the annual Maple Leafs visit. Stay with us. We'll be right back. It's a tradition that dates back to the late 1920s. Players from the Toronto Maple Leafs visit sick kids at Sick Kids Hospital. They bring Leaf swag, take pics, and sign autographs, and we joined them today for the visit.
You're prepared.
He didn't see you at first. He was waiting for his match.
I mean, today's great. It's always a lot of fun for us. I get to come in here, and I mean, we're smiling just as much as these kids are. So it's always great coming in here and talking to them, and I think just trying to help them forget about why they're in here, and try and make their days a little better. There's a lot more to hockey, and I think. We're a lot more than hockey players in this locker room. We want to try and do more than just play hockey. We want to try and be a person people can look up to in the community and around the world. And it starts in here. I mean, we just want to come in here and try and make these kids feel better and try and forget about why they're in here. I think the first thing, just seeing all the kids smiling, laughing, just seeing them interact with us and just seeing how much it makes their day better. I think for us, it's the same thing, how much it makes our days feel better, and it really makes us, I think, realize how much we can make a difference in someone's life. And like I said, it's always a day I think a lot of us look forward to and look forward to getting here.
We had a good overtime battle last game.
Seeing people here that are fighting, and you see the smiles on their faces, and you recognize just how they're handling tough times. There's a lot to be said for that. And the people that I've met here so far in the short time I've been here are very positive and very upbeat, very happy to see the Leafs here, of course, but also just have a fighting spirit about them, and that's a cool thing to witness.
Oh, look at that smile. She's pretty good. So you know something else the Leafs did?
Yes, I do.
Some of them have done what you did yesterday.
That's
so
right.
Tell us about it. Now here we have pictures. Is that you right there?
Believe me, I watched Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner, the video of them doing it over and over, being cannon dolls in the Nutcracker.
Okay.
So that I could try and get an idea of how I was going to do it yesterday.
Let's see.
You got to do three things, three big movements, right? Quite slowly so people can see. So maybe you do, no, I hate big noises, please don't shoot it. So one more time, three things. No, noises, don't. Great. Turns to Todd, yes, yes, shoot. Great. Comes forward again. Once again, he asks you, what should I do? No. What should I do? Yes. Bang. Right? faint. Oh my God, quick.
You
quick,
be
quick, quick.
fine.
Yeah. Wait till you see his eyes before you faint, right? And you can make a big deal. You can do, I'm fainting, right, in case he forgets. If you get anywhere where you're going to be in anybody's way, Ethan will just say, Cannondals, retreat, right? And you'll come back, right? But you will be fine. Basically, the most important thing is to have a good time.
Yeah, oh,
right?
well, I'm already having a good time.
This should be a lot of fun.
Oh, here we go. This would make some nice pajamas.
Folks, we gotta give our Colette a round of applause. That was a great job. My boy Todd there caught you. That was nice. He didn't drop you.
That was my biggest worry is I'm gonna fall.
And just
be
the
there
trust.
to catch me.
Yes, I've done it in the past. It's a lot of fun. Shout out to the National Ballet and the Nutcracker.
They were so helpful, lovely, and cool to be there behind the magic, like behind the scenes stuff.
Man, I wish we had credits because we should go out on that. All right, that was very cool.
Oh, weather?
Yeah, we actually got to do something. Your 15 minutes is over.
It's okay. It was worth it. We are talking about some colder air that's coming in, but it's not here yet. So we kind of get tonight and tomorrow, Dwight, before we're really going to feel the impact. So -7 tonight. That system passing just to the south of us. We'll likely see some flurries even into tomorrow morning, that potential. And then into the afternoon, we should see that breaking up and getting up to about 1 degree. And then that cold Arctic air comes in for Wednesday and Thursday.
What are you going to do? I think my favorite part is when you were like falling. Oh, I'm going to faint.
I've got the vapors.
Have a good night, everybody. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Oh,